Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to STL History Live, brought to you by the Missouri Historical Society. I hope everyone can hear me. If you cannot, please adjust the volume on your laptop, computer, or your listening device. I hope everyone is staying nice and healthy and safe during this time of the COVID-19 outbreak, but we'd still like to bring you an awesome program from the Missouri Historical Society with some and our community partners. Today we're excited to have Sal Valdez, one of the Missouri Historical Society's members and a member of the Latinx community and the Hispanic and the Hispanic leadership group. Who's on one of our advisory boards, to really talk to you today about the legacies and contributions of the Latinx and Hispanic communities within the U.S. military. But before we get started, I would like to go over some quick housekeeping notes with you. All participants at this time are muted and will remain so throughout the presentation. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, we do ask that you use the question and answer box. You can find that located on your screen, which is located either at the top or the bottom of your screen. You'll see you'll see something that says Q&A, and if you click there, you'll be able to answer questions. Myself, as the moderator, will be the only person that can read your questions, and we will answer those towards the end of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, there will also be a link to a short video. We don't have time to watch it today. However, all participants will be emailed this link, and that gives a list of all of the Hispanic and Latinx members of the U.S. Armed Forces that received the Medal of Honor. We do ask that after the presentation and after you receive that email, you go through and take time to watch that short video and learn a little bit more about those stories of members of the U.S. community, both born here and born abroad, that contributed to our nation's history, and some of whom made the ultimate sacrifice for our country and our country's flag. Today is an extra special day because not only do we get to bring you this awesome presentation, but we're also honoring the birthday of Private Felix Longoria, a veteran of the Second World War, who gave his life for our country during that time period. And you'll learn a little bit more about Private Felix Longoria in today's presentation. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Sal Valdez of the Missouri Historical Society's Latinx advisory board. Sal, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Are we ready to roll?
I believe so.
Okay, we are at on the slide. It begins at 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and begin with an introduction. First
Sal,
of all, I'd like to.
Sal, sorry to interrupt. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors for today's program. Sorry about that. Today's program is brought to you by Beelman Truck Company, and it's through great partnerships with Beelman and other organizations that allow us to offer these awesome programs. So thank you, Sal.
Hey, okay, no problem, Marvin. One more thing, Marvin. When I want to go to the next slide, I just tell you next. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're ready to roll. Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone. My name is Sal Valadez, and I think we have a slide coming up with information about myself, so I don't. Marvin, could you put the next slide? Okay, and the next slide. There we go. Okay, So you have a little background on myself. I'll just give you a little bit more history. First of all, I'd like to thank the Missouri Historical Society uh, in the Latinx Advisory Board members, including Marvin and Lindsay Newton, who's chairing that committee, and really appreciate being included. To begin with, I'm an amateur historian. By no means am I consider myself a professional researcher or historian, but I do love history. I have loved history as a child. I loved listening to the stories of my family, my elders, and other folks in the community, and I was an avid reader of history. Uh, and I'm a Mexican immigrant. I was born in El Cerrito de Aguas in Zacatecas, Mexico. Well, my father was. I was born in Obtule, Aguascalientes. And so our family comes from central Mexico. Um, Recently had my DNA test, so I'm 48% European and 48% Native American. We chose, okay, another technical glitch. So there I am. So as you can tell, uh, 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 I am part European, almost half European, and almost half Native American. So my family, I'm the descendant of families that immigrated to the United States, to Aurora, Illinois, and worked for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, and lived in a boxcar community. And my uncle Wally was a veteran and served in the Europe in the Pacific Theater during World War II. So you see my information there, and we'll move on to the next slide. I think the next slide, Marvin. Great. So why is history so important? At least from my perspective, we are a nation of immigrants. Our history is very important. Today's presentation is only going to touch on a bit of history. It's like unpeeling the onion. It's going to focus on our Latino contributions to service to our country. We are tremendously proud to be Americans. We are tremendously proud, those of us who have immigrated, to have the opportunity to be in the United States, and when served, when called, we've served. And Marvin, did you want to say something? Did I disturb you? Okay.
Nope, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, great. So why is history so important? I think George Santayana said it so well, and I think we keep hearing it, that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And George Santayana was actually Jorge Agustín Nicolás Ruiz de Santayana, and he was a Spanish-born, Harvard-trained American world philosopher. Next slide, please. Love of country and call to duty. Hispanics born in the United States have always served with distinction in all of our conflicts in the United States, including the American Revolution to the present day conflicts. The Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor in action against enemy forces, which can be bestowed upon individuals serving in the armed forces of the United States. And it, according to the Department of Defense, Hispanics by identifiable ethnic group have been awarded the highest number, 61 medals of honor, since its inception in the Civil War. We'll get the link to the video that Marvin mentioned, and you can go through that list. It gives all the details, and hope you'll take time to review it once you get the link. Of these 61 heroes, 5 Medal of Honor recipients were born in Mexico. One World War II MOH recipient of Mexican descent was considered at that time as being. One was from Chile, one was from Spain, and 8 Medal of Honor recipients were from Puerto Rico. Next slide. Here's a description of the Medal of Honor, and of the Medal of Honor winners that were Hispanic, 61, 42 of them received this medal posthumously. Next slide. We're going to get some items out of the way in terms of what it is to be Latino, Latino X, or Hispanic. It's about history, geography, language, and culture. And there are multiple interpretations, but this one, I think, at least for me, lets people know what the differences are between being Latino and Hispanic. Actually, it's like a Venn diagram. There's a sweet spot. We are all Latino in terms of the Americas, but some of us do not speak Spanish. Some of us are not Hispanic. So Hispanic includes people from Spain, but it does not, in these countries that are listed, it does not include Brazil, French Guiana, etc. So it's just a little template for us to use when we clarify what it is to be Latino and Hispanic. Next slide. So let's do a little brief history that leads up to the situation here in the United States. As you know, we live in the country that so oftentimes does not understand the history of how the past plays into the present and the future. And there are, although we are a country that embraces immigration, immigrants, at the same time, we live in a contradiction that due to socioeconomic situations in our country, there are deep-rooted sentiments that are negative or play a role in how we perceive immigrants, especially the current situation with people from south of the border and Central and South America. So in 1492, Columbus stumbles into the Americas and the European conquest of the first Americans. In 1501 and then 1619, African slaves are brought to the Spanish and American colonies. And sadly, in 1709, Africans and Native Americans are sold as slaves at a market established at the foot of Wall Street, New York. In 1776, we have the American Independence Declared, and from 1762 to 1804, the Spanish governed St. Louis. And I'd like to take a second here to recognize Daniel Gonzalez, historian who worked in our region recently, and he's no longer with us, but I think he's maybe with us today at this presentation. And he really provided a tremendous amount of, made a tremendous contribution to the history of the Spanish and the Mexicans and other Latinos here in our St. Louis, and brought to light what often is hidden away in a corner or not paid attention to in our history books. So Daniel, I really appreciate the work that you've done. I look forward to your work in the future and your presentation in the future. In 1846, the Mexican-American War, and lands and people were ceded to the United States. In the Civil War, the Medal of Honor was established. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusionary Act was passed by Congress, and it plays a great role in the subsequent migration of Mexicans from in the late 19th century, the early 20th century, into the 1930s. So next slide, please. So other key events from 1898 to 1968. The United States goes to war with Spain. Territories are ceded. In 1948, President Truman desegregates the military. In 1952, Puerto Rico was formally established as the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. In 1952, the Immigration Natural Service began to Operation Wetback to repatriate by force, often people back to Mexico. Oftentimes, included in that movement was forceful repatriation were American citizens. 1954, the Civil Rights Movement begins, and along with that, it was not just the African Americans, but it was also the Mexican civil rights leaders and many other people who sought justice for the injustices that were done to people of color. And in 1968, Congress authorizes President Johnson to proclaim National Hispanic Heritage Week. Next slide. So Mexican migration to the United States. And I think some of Daniel Gonzalez's work has touched on this. But people forget, and again, this is why history is so important, that things happen that are impacting us even today. After the signing of the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo, the United States and Mexico, 75,000 Mexicans were accorded American citizenship in all of its rights and responsibilities. So the United States came to Mexico and took that land during that war. And just a footnote to that, if you look at the history books, how it's told is that it was for the settlers, the Texans, independents, etc. What the root cause of it was the issue of slavery. The Mexicans did not want slavery in Texas. And this gave rise it was kind of like foretelling the Civil War. A young congressman from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, spoke up against the war, as he termed it, it was an unjust war. So we move forward, and after the 1882 Chinese Exclusionary Act, there was a shortage of labor between 1900 and 1932. The Mexican population in the United States grew to 1,400,000, and this was an era that was caused by major transformation in the Americas because of immigration laws that began in the 1880s. Mexican Revolution in 1910, World War I, also introduced an influx of Mexican migration to the United States. But at the same time, cautious American officials scrambled to regulate the flow across the southern border in a way that reconciled labor needs and native societies in the American side of the border. And we see some of that playing out even today. The United States is both an opportunity for many immigrants, but it also is a supply and demand type of thing where the work is here and there's a demand. You see that ongoing right now in the pandemic, the farm worker situation. And so there's always been a mutual give and go. In fact, we didn't have Border Patrol agents into until the 1920s, 1930s, maybe even later than that. But it was the border was very fluid for many years. And in the early 20th century, Mexicans accounted for 60% of labor, especially in the railroads. The track maintenance came, and that gave rise, of course, to the boxcar communities, which would make an interesting topic in another project. So again, it was all about labor. It was all about supply and demand. But during the Great Depression, the Caucasians from the Dust Bowl were competing with Mexicans for these low-paying jobs, and both in Mexican labor subsequently suffered combined effects of economic depression and discrimination. Next slide, please. So what is the Chinese Exclusionary Act? As you can see, there's on the left slide is it says it all to me. Chinese came and helped build the railroads, labor, they worked, and then was setting up, and the Chinese Exclusionary Act of 1882 both closed the door to the Chinese but opened the door to the migration of Mexicans. And the Mexican Revolution speeded that process up even further. So it's all about labor politics. Next slide. And there were hardships. There was oftentimes extreme discrimination, violence. The Texas Rangers Texas were guilty of, for example, promoting violence, and there was a massacre in Texas of the Mexican community. And so, alongside with our Black brothers and sisters, we were marginalized and oftentimes were victims of violence. Next slide. So, the ideal, our American ideals and values, the American Revolution, hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is our ideal, these are our values, but often, as you'll see, we touched a little bit on, there's a contradiction of what happens to those that are immigrants, and especially those that are the most recent immigrants. Next slide, please. So, nonetheless, we consider ourselves Americans, we consider ourselves patriots, and Crispus Attucks, escaped slave whose parents were of African and Native American slave origin. He's regarded as the first patriot killed in the Boston Massacre, and thus the first American killed in the American Revolution. Next slide. The Spanish came to the aid of the United States. And, Spanish Governor General Bernardo Vicente de Galva y Madrid raised an army and navy of 8,000 Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and others from Spanish colonies in the Americas to defend America's flank, the southeast borders and ports. So he is considered the American Revolution Spanish savior. Slide, please. Civil War. This was when the Medal of Honor was created, and the very first Hispanic Medal of Honor went to ordinary seaman Philip Bazar. He was from Massachusetts, serving on the USS Santiago de Cuba, United States Navy. And he received his Medal of Honor for his actions during the assault on Fort Fisher in 1865. And he was from Chile, South America. Next slide, please. Another U.S. Civil War hero, famed for his damn the torpedoes full speed ahead command at the naval battle of Mobile Bay on 5 August 1864. It's Admiral David Farragut, and he is considered the hero of that battle, and his family roots are in Menorca, Spain. Next slide, please. World War I, Hispanics over there. David Barclay enlisted in the army at 17 and was sent to France during World War I. He kept his identity, his background as a secret, in fear that his Mexican heritage would keep him from serving the front lines. At that time, segregation in the army kept minority soldiers from serving in combat. So he instructed his mother in a letter not to use her maiden name that would prevent his removal from combat. And subsequently, he was killed in action and awarded the Hispanic Medal of Honor. I'm sorry, I was distracted there by the commands of my coming across my computer. So anyway, yeah, we can move to the next slide, please. Los veteranos, Latinos in World War II. Please note the posters. This is America Todos, luchamos por la victoria. Americans all, let's fight for victory. Over 500,000 Latinos, including 350,000 Mexican Americans and 53,000 Puerto Ricans, served in World War II. And the exact numbers are difficult because of for the exception of the 65th Infantry Regiment from Puerto Rico. Latinos were not segregated in separate units as African Americans. Along with everybody else, thousands of Latinos rushed to enlist in World War II. They served with distinction throughout Europe, North Africa, the Aleutians, and the Mediterranean. Among other honors earned, which included several medals of honor, that were awarded to Latinos for service during World War II. In the Pacific Theater, the 158th Regimental Combat Team, who was composed largely of Latino and Native Americans, fought in New Guinea and the Philippines. They impressed General MacArthur, who called them the greatest fighting combat team ever deployed in battle. Latino soldiers were aiding the defense of the Philippines. Their fluency in Spanish was invaluable when serving with the Spanish-speaking Filipinos. The European theater, Latino soldiers from the 36th Infantry Division from Texas were among the first soldiers to land on Italian soil and suffered heavy casualties, crossing the Rapido River in Casino. The 88th Infantry Division, with draftees from southwestern states, was ranked in the top 10 for combat effectiveness. Next slide. Private Felix Z. Longoria was awarded a Purple Heart Combat Infantry Badge. And he was born and raised in Texas. Longoria enlisted in the Army in November 44 and was assigned to a regiment fighting in the Philippines. On June 16, 1945, 15 days after landing in Luzon, Private Longoria was killed in an ambush. It took several years for his remains to be recovered and repatriated. Then a Texas funeral director refused to hold a wake for Longoria because he was of Mexican-American descent. GI Forum, a Hispanic veterans and civil rights organization founded in 1948, brought this to the national national attention, and Texas Senator Lyndon Johnson obtained authorization for Longoria's remains to be buried at the Arlington National Cemetery. It was not until February 16, 1949, that he was laid to rest with full military honor. Senator and Lady Bird Johnson were in attendance. People have gathered at his grave annually for decades, and the Felix Longoria affair played a significant role in catalyzing Mexican-American political consciousness and activism. And today is his birthday. Hispanic women and men also served in the military in World War II. On your left, you have Staff Sergeant Eva Romero Jaques, World War II branch, Army Air Forces. Her unit was the Far East Aid Service Command, and she served in Guinea, the Philippines, and the Pacific Theater with distinction. On your right is my good friend. This is someone I know personally. World War II United States Army Air Force Staff Sergeant Joe Bellman. He is still alive. He's in his early 90s. And he's from Lockport, Illinois, and still lives in Lockport. He served 35 combat missions as a B-17 ball turret gunner, one of the most dangerous jobs that you could have on a B-17. When I talked to Joe, I said, Joe, how did you feel when you were flying in combat? He says, hey, I was young. I wasn't afraid. I volunteered to fly because they fed us well before each combat mission. I met Joe about 10 years ago when I was working at Joliet Junior College, and he came to visit me. Joe, I give you my condolences. His wife had just passed. He said, and I said, Joe, do you have any regrets? And he goes, I only really have one at my age. That is that I never received my medals from my time in the Air Force in World War II. I said, well, I think I can help out with you with your permission. So to make a long story short, we had a great ceremony at the college. A lot of people attended. After I reached out to Senator Durbin and arranged for Joe to get his medals. But he's still alive, and he's a great guy. He visits us down here in St. Louis and every year, and hopefully we could arrange for a visit to the museum for him and visit with the museum staff, and maybe even get him to talk in public. He's a good guy. Next slide, please. Another example of our service to the country is Carroll Street USA. You may or may not have heard about it. It's in Silvis, Illinois. And it was, this was a town, very small town that was the home to children of Mexican immigrants who worked in the shop of the Rock Island Railroad. And they are recognized by Congress. 2nd Street USA is officially known as Hero Street USA, where from this 2nd Street, whereas on the east side of Hero Street USA, the memorial will recognize the Memorial Park. And this is the Memorial Park plaque, our plaque that, that recognizes the 6 men died in World War II and 2 in the Korean conflict. Some families sent as many as 6 or 7 sons. Some men served in both wars. At the date of the erection of this marker, over 110 men and women from this small area had served in the United States, exemplifying American patriotism at the highest level. It was erected by the City of Silvis and the Illinois State Historical Society. Next slide, please. World War II and the Korean War. Again served the one unit that was distinguished itself with the Borinqueros, Los Borinqueños from Puerto Rico. Of their contributions, General Douglas MacArthur, then commander of the United Nations forces in Korea, said, quote, "The Puerto Ricans forming the ranks of the gallant 65th Infantry in the battlefields of Korea are writing a brilliant record of achievement in battle, and I am proud to have them in this community. I wish that we might have many more like them." And in April 2016, the 65th Infantry Regiment, the last U.S. military unit to be segregated, was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in a ceremony on Capitol Hill. Next slide. And that is that's the end of my presentation. We were hoping to show the Hispanic Medal of Honor YouTube video. It has everybody included in there and their stories. And it's only about 8 minutes long, so we will have Marvin, as he offered, to send the link out to everybody. But in conclusion, I would just like to end by saying that in this type of a presentation is so important because, again, our past affects our present and our future. And we must tell our stories. And I'm so proud of the Missouri Historical Society and museums to really be inclusive and to ask for our participation and other communities' participation in their efforts to tell the many stories. It's not one story, it's many stories. It's a process of unpeeling the onion. Every generation has a story. And our history is so important, not just for us, but for everybody to share a better understanding of the history of immigration and migration. With the exception of those of us who share Native American blood, those of us who are members of Native American tribes and descendants of those communities, we are all immigrants. We are here, and the unfortunate part is that we fail to recognize history. And I go back to the first 2 slides, through the slides where I went through the history of the conquest of the Americas and the enslavement of our African brothers and sisters, is that somehow societies must justify why those events occurred, conquest and slavery. And part of that is that people and their descendants end up marginalized. And it's history. And history is truthful. And history can reveal why our present situation is impacted by the events of the past. So it can guide us into how we make decisions about the future. But I want to thank everybody for indulging me. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share this brief perspective, but there is so much else to talk about and so many other stories to tell. So I thank you, and I will pass this conversation back over to Marvin.
Thank you, Sal, for that amazing presentation. We're going to open it up now for questions and answers. And there's again, for those of you who have questions for Sal, you can go to the question and answer box, which is on the tab on your screen that says Q&A, and we'll be able to answer those questions for you. So Sal, the first question that comes in is, how did the Latinx and Hispanic communities participate in the war on the home front during World War II?
Well, I'm going to tell a story about my family. How did we serve? They served in manufacturing and war production. Women volunteered and flew airplanes and worked in the munitions and the railroads. My uncle Benny, my uncle Wally went off to war and fought in the Pacific Theater, and his brother Benny worked at the shops at the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad shops in the war, and because his work was deemed essential, and what he was a painter. So the Mexican communities, the Latino communities, the Latinx communities served in the same capacity as other folks, all united, as that poster said, to defeat the Axis powers. So they contributed in many, many ways.
I'm waiting for some more questions to kind of pop through.
It's a lengthy and very detailed story once you start unpeeling the onion. And, as I said, this is because of the time, we couldn't go into a lot of the details. So my intention was to raise more questions than look for other potential projects down the road, especially as it relates to the 150th anniversary of the state of Missouri, because we have large communities in Kansas City and the Guadalupe centers who have kept their histories, and I'd be curious to see what those communities have to say, and certainly explore more in detail the impact of Latino, Mexican, and other Latino communities' migration into St. Louis area. I know we have a pocket of older generation community, Mexican community in Fairmont City. We know that there were Mexicans living in East St. Louis. And so it'd be an interesting project to look at the archival material, especially from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the U.S. Census data and the military data that's available through the federal government.
There's some more questions coming in. Let's see. So Robin Caldwell just asked, thank you for sharing the story and sharing it so thoroughly and honestly. Robin's question is, what was the Latino and Hispanic migration north, excuse me, north parallel to the African American Great Migration? So what was the, so obviously during the turn of the century and late 19th century, early 20th century, there was the Great Migration. What was the parallels between the Latin and Hispanic communities, their migration as well?
Well, it was all driven by work. That's one of the similarities. The Black migration moved to the north, the industrial north. The Mexican migration, it was a little different in that we had to cross borders. There were actually railroads recruiting for Mexican labor because like the Missouri Pacific lines were extended down through Mexico. They still serve the Mexican border and into Mexico. And the tourist industry into Mexico with the Santa Fe and other railroads extended all the way down to Mexico City. And the Chicago and Alton Railroad played an important role with that phenomenon of the growth of the railroads in the 1880s and moving forward. But there are some differences. The reason people were moving from Mexico was because of the jobs, very similar to what happened with our Black communities from moving from the south to the north. But the roots of our issues were a little different in that in Mexico it was poverty and the politics and you know, people wanting to survive and to do well. The roots of the African migration lay in the roots of slavery. And it's just my opinion. And people may be offended and they may disagree. And that's fine because this is what this exercise is about. But I truly believe that the marginalization that continues to this day has its roots. Almost the Civil War, in some ways, did not do away with the psychology of slavery and subjugation and marginalization. Likewise, want to draw a parallel to the war between Mexico and the United States in 1948 that Abraham Lincoln called unjust. People suffered. People continue to suffer. Those of Mexican descent continue to suffer in the American Southwest. And there was murder. There were lynchings. And so there are parallels, but very different situations. But both communities driven for that need. I mean, you ask a parent, what would you do to help your family survive? I know for my descendants, my father, it was a matter of survival. I almost hate to bring this up, but I will because it's so personal. But I was a 2 or 3-year-old in Mexico. And I can remember being on a train with my mom and my young brother, who was a year younger than me. And I remember him begging for food on the train. And our family suffered. So likewise in the African American community and other immigrants. But I do see a distinction between the African Black experience. Our brothers and sisters there have suffered for so long, and it's like we are still in a hangover left over from slavery and the Civil War. And that's just again just my opinion. But some of these sentiments that people carry about the stereotypes, and you hear them today about the border wall, about immigrants, about, they forget that we contribute, that that some of us, yes, came over yesterday, but some of us have deep roots and been here until the United States came to us. Nonetheless, like the Tuskegee Airmen, the Buffalo Soldiers, the the Japanese Americans who served in the most decorated unit of its size in World War II, 442nd, and the Borinqueños and the Mexican Americans and all those thousands of people who have served. We all serve because we love this country. We see the potential. We are patriots, and that's the one thing that brings us together. We do love this
country. So we have quite a few questions and coming in, and not that much time left. We have about 7 minutes left, but a great question came in. Could you briefly explain the Mexican Revolution and the parties involved, what part Pancho Villa played, and how the outcome of the revolution affected Mexican-American relations, especially amongst Mexican Americans living in the United States, and how they were perceived by their fellow countrymen that were not of Mexican descent.
I'll answer the last question first. And in our experience, and I experienced this, we oftentimes lived in a marginalized community. I think the one slide that I had, no Spanish or Mexicans allowed. People of color sometimes experience that, as I sometimes explain to folks, and this is personal. This is very personal. I say, to my Caucasian brothers and sisters, when you wake up in the morning, do you look in the mirror and think about the color of your skin? For some of us, that's a reality. I know that sometime at some point of the day, somebody's going to remind me that I'm Mexican descent. I'm a person of color. I say that, but I want you to also know that my wife is Irish. Our family is blended. We have everybody from African American to Mexicans, and we intermarried with other people. But there's this underlying tension, especially in current society, about people of color. And it's always been there, but sometimes it's more obvious than not. Now, on the Mexican Revolution, Daniel Gonzalez has started, in fact, has a book or wrote an article about that, and I would recommend reading Daniel Gonzalez's work on the Mexican Revolution. What that was about was basically people getting trampled by their government, people being abused and murdered by their government. Pancho Villa's role, he is both a hero in the United States and in Mexico. He was one of our great generals. And I think if you read into the real story of what happened, not what you see in the movies, is the history, the actual history, is a complicated story, and there were politics involved in his raids in Arizona, or in part motivated, I believe, by some bad dealings between Pancho and the bank, I believe. But I'm not an expert, so I would refer those questions to friends like Daniel Gonzalez and other experts on the dynamics of Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution.
So there's actually a really great documentary called on PBS that you can watch, and you can also find it on YouTube. It's called The Storm That Swept Mexico, and it's all about that history of U.S.-Mexican relations from the late 1800s until today. So for the person who asked that question, I would definitely recommend looking that up on YouTube, The Storm That Swept Mexico. And actually, in your last answer, you talked about that idea of assimilation, and Dennis Gonzalez asks the question, did assimilation occur quicker in any other area of the country than others? So as Latinos, as Hispanics are immigrating to the United States, whether it be California, whether it be the Deep South in Georgia, in Florida, whether it's New York, New Jersey, or New England, how did immigration or the service of these soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, how did that affect assimilation?
Well, Mexicans are everywhere. I lived in Iowa for a while. I grew up in I've traveled. And there are so many stories that are similar. A lot of them, the stories, a lot of the where people settled in were around railroad communities. But we also worked the beet fields. We worked manufacturing. Some of us came up as professionals. And assimilation is a choice, I believe. The same as self-identity. It's got to do with intergenerational differences or the dynamics. I am a Latino. My self-identity, I'm a Latino of Mexican descent. An immigrant. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen. Assimilation, to me, people assimilated, which to me, assimilation means loss of identity, roots, because you're going to be focused on English because that's the way to succeed, and at the same time you're going to lose part of your culture and identity because you want to be the stereotypical or the mainstream American, which is fine because that's a choice. And I don't know if we became American in my family because in this way, my mother and father could not speak English. I was their interpreter for medical, dental, whatever, at a very young age. And my father worked for the railroad, and he retired from the CDQ. He was a diesel mechanic. But he said this. He said, "You have an important story. Your history is important. I'm going to teach you that." I said, "And you are going to speak both English and Spanish. You are going to speak English because you need to succeed in this society. Your goal is to learn English and go to school and learn and be successful. But you're going to also learn Spanish because your mom and I don't speak it or speak English very well. and it's going to be difficult for us to learn. Plus, our dream is to take you to a visit. And he meant our family to a visit in Mexico. And it would be such a shame if you cannot communicate with your grandmothers and aunts and uncles. So assimilation means different things for people. I look at it more as a salad bowl. It's a choice, but the one thing I want to stress is self-identity. It's what people choose to be. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's my perspective on that issue.
And we only have like about 30 seconds left, but there was a question, the last question that I would like to ask is from Whitney. She says, here in St. Louis, there were marches regarding equal work and pay for factories with government contracts by African Americans. Can you explain any similarities in the experience of the Latinx and Hispanic communities? Did they struggle for equal employment? Were they more likely to be employed over African Americans? Were women more able to work in factories on the home front, or were women's roles still very divided in those in the Latinx and Hispanic communities as well?
I think that's been an issue for all of us. I mean, mainstream America. I mean, you can't pass women's rights in Congress. So I think that gender difference has always been there. And yes, we have labor leaders, Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez, to name a couple that worked. You know, the civil rights was both African Americans and others, and so there has been a partnership within our communities to work the civil rights for everyone. Excuse me, allergies, so there's a history, and again, that's, you know, all these questions bring up research and stories that need to be told. So I'm hoping that is encouraging. And I do want to say one thing, that it's not us against anybody. It's when I talk about my Caucasian brothers and sisters, you know, I'm looking at history, what happened, and how it impacts us now. But the way that we're going to move forward and really tell the true stories about our relationships with ourselves now and in the past, and hopefully shape the future, so we can be at a better place, all of us together. And this pandemic is a clear example of how communities are marginalized. We have to change those together so that everybody has equal access to everything. And so the history is important because it tells us a lot about where we are now and how to shape our future. And that's why these presentations by the Missouri Historical Society are so important. And I'm honored and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share at least my perspective. And I wish everyone the best of luck.
Thank you, Sal, again for that that great presentation and the amazing research that you've done. And I want to thank you all for tuning in today to Soldiers Memorial Challenge Chat offered through STL History Live from the Missouri Historical Society. If to support our programs, please consider becoming a member. You can find membership information at mohistory.org/support on the link on the screen. And if you're interested in other topics, please look on our social media. Please look online at mohistory.org, or find us on Facebook, on Instagram, or Twitter. And we're promoting our upcoming events. Our next STL History Live event will be Friday, April 17th at 2 p.m. On Small Objects, Big Stories, looking at objects from our collections. And then again on Tuesday, April 21st at 11, Hidden in Plain Sight. So please come out, well, not come out, please stay at home and practice social distancing. but please tune in to STL History Live. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for finding yourself here. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.